My first quote of all time was, "Sloths poop once a week," and the governor said, "Yep." Hello, I'm Kyle Green, and welcome to the Greenway Outdoors Podcast, episode 88. And AJ, why don't you introduce yourself? I did a little different.
Oh, okay.
A little curveball.
I'm AJ.
I'm Jeff.
I'm Ryan.
Yeah. Well, I just mixed it up a little bit this week.
Before we start, I haven't been here in like 3 weeks. I've unplugged things several times just by sitting here. Have we moved anything? Is there anything I can do to kick something and ruin something?
No, you still got to talk in the mic.
You'll find a way.
I feel like you're walking through a store and it's like all the china's just sitting there on a shelf, not even protected, and you're like,
he ruins everything.
You gotta be careful. That's how I feel.
You're gonna make everything levitate and just break anyway.
Yeah. He's like starts pressing buttons on the cameras, and AJ just grabs him by the.
What are you doing?
Listen here.
You've never done that before. Why are you doing that now?
The one week it was some cord underneath the table or something. Yep. It like goes to the whole soundboard and everything. He's
I
like,
moved my foot like this, and he just went boom.
We were all so surprised too. The best part was where we all just looked at Jeff when it happened.
Like, I might have tapped my foot once. I'm sorry.
You did something.
You know what you did.
You did it.
Like, sorry about that. Oh, sorry about that. So this is episode 88, and we've got some exciting stories for you.
Oh, speak of exciting story, I've got a quick one.
I said we had exciting.
It doesn't have a lot of details, so I want to get it out of the way, but it's pretty good.
Okay.
There was a lady. Her name
name
is Maya Murmu. She's an adorable 70-year-old lady.
Related to you?
No. living in India. And she went out to her local well to go pump some water. Yep. You know, pretty
we all
simple,
need that water.
Simple little area.
Is it like one of the sad ones where she had to take the bowl on her head, or is it more normal?
Good question.
Not that many details, like I said.
Paint the picture.
Maybe if you could just listen to the story.
Make it like it's your coloring book. You know, color it in how you see fit.
She's walking.
Okay.
To the well. She starts pumping her water.
While walking.
No, she got to the well. She's pumping her water. Elephant comes out of nowhere, tramples her to death.
Whoa!
What?
Elephant?
Why is this funny?
Elephant.
You're telling it like it's funny.
No,
you could have told this different. You could have told it different ways where you're like calm.
No. So she gets trampled to death. Very sad. This elephant escaped from some kind of sanctuary in like a neighboring state, so it traveled a long way to get here.
Are they tagging these things?
To trample her to death. The family, obviously very sad. In their local area, the way they treat deceased people is they do the whole pyre thing where they, do a ceremony. They put them on top of the pyre, they light it, and
send them to sea.
No, just like
burn Viking funeral,
like Darth Vader,
but without the send off in the boat. They start the process. They get ready to light the thing. The elephant comes again, grabs her body off the pyre, and throws it in the air. And it's like, what?
She's already gone.
Begs the question, what did this lady do to that poor elephant?
I need to know.
That made it attack her and then remember her and come back for her again.
There's some outside intelligence in that elephant.
That's all I know. That was the extent of the story.
Where is the story from?
Reddit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But it was like it was a link to an actual news source, but it wasn't just on Reddit.
That is miserable.
Wild story.
He told me that the other day. That's why I was struggling. And when he told me it, he built it up like he didn't allude to it being funny. He was reading it off of his phone.
But it's
and
hard
serious.
To you've read it the second time to like.
But then
it's bizarre.
But he was like, we were both hearing it for the first time as he was reading it, and I just lost it. He goes, because he looks up from his phone, he goes, "What on earth do you think she did to that elephant?"
Because poor lady, why would an elephant trample her and then come back? But like to come back to the funeral.
Yeah, and
what?
Sounds like my family.
Could have attacked anyone at the funeral and went back for her.
How many days post-death to the funeral? Was the elephant? I mean, we don't know, but
the tale goes that the elephant rose the woman on the third day. Yeah, it's I'm sorry. It was make it Christian. Make it a Christian.
Oh, okay.
Morbid, but Christian.
Yeah, I don't know why. That's
so interesting stories you said.
Yeah, not as good as that.
You're gonna beat this one.
It's like, do you have anything that you laugh at that you shouldn't laugh at?
Oh,
every day.
Yeah. What do you got? I know mine.
On the spot? I don't know, a lady getting killed by an elephant and then getting thrown from her funeral. That's a pretty good one.
Something for me, if anybody, and I know it's going to make me sound like a bad person. And I know I laughed through that whole story, and that's pretty bad too, but just hear me out. The one that gets me is someone being hit while they're on a bicycle pretty good, but not good enough to go down initially. So they try and save it.
That they wobble.
But they try and save it, but then they go down. Those are my favorite. I've seen it 3 times in my life.
What does it look like?
Well, they get bumped and they try and do this,
like
and
the
they
speed wobbles? Oh, okay.
It's the overcorrecting.
Okay.
It's the overcorrecting where they
almost always end up overcorrecting and then going over the handlebars.
Another story that I can't go without wetting myself every time I hear it, and I try not to do it because it's been talked about so much. Mr. Slater, Scott's dad.
Oh,
yeah. You know what I was saying. He was on they have like one of those pontoon paddle boats. So it's like it's like got a bench seat on it, like you're at a park bench, and it's got pedals, and it's got pontoons, but it's little, but it's enough for 2 people.
I think they call them pedal boats.
Pedal boats? Pedal pontoon?
But it's more pontoon.
Yeah, the pedal boats that you sit in that you can get for $699 on Bass Pro's website. The ones that you're talking about, though, this you sit upright. I think you've seen the thing, actually.
I know. I've seen them.
Is it like the ones that made all out of metal?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
So he was on one of those, and they were. I'm already laughing. They were in their. They were in their canal fishing for crappie, and in the canal, I think it's no wake.
I don't know how you can make a wake in this canal.
There's no lake anymore, so it doesn't really. It's in Gladwin.
It's what, maybe like 15 feet across?
Yeah, it's no.
it's bigger than that.
It's about.
Is it?
It's about 40.
Well, maybe now it's
about
15 feet across.
Yeah, no, it is. It's about 40 yards.
The channel.
Yeah, I guess when the water was
The
up.
channel
Okay.
is. So, Scott's dad and I think his uncle were fishing, but at least his dad was. They were in the it's just so funny
I
to
don't
me.
know if this warrants a snort.
I can't help it. So they're in the canal fishing, and all of a sudden they hear like distance. They're like boom, 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 like music. Yeah, give me some music. Can you beatbox?
Hey.
Baby, I got your money, don't you? Say hey.
Yep.
So that's what he hears, and it's like getting louder, and it's like, baby, I got your money.
Yep.
And all of a sudden they come around the corner, and it's a speedboat, and it's like sunset. So it's like just getting dark. It's just past the pink lighting stage of the summer night. And
So not only is it a place you shouldn't have a wake, it's also a time you shouldn't have a wake.
yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
you're allowed. I think it's a no wake time for
It
sure.
definitely is.
Yeah. And they come booking around the side, and Scott said his dad, and this is what gets me, is like yelling like, hey, waving their arms.
No.
I think it's the waving of the arms like, please don't hit me, that gets me.
Yeah.
Ryan's just disgusted with us right now. And he's like waving and stuff, and they don't see him. They just keep going right at him. And his dad had to bail off the boat, dives in, and it just decimates the boat, just blows right through the pontoon boat. Just
Splitter in twain.
Yep.
yeah, and he barely cleared it, and I know it's not funny, but you see
That's one of those that, like, once the dust settles and no one's hurt, like, you could see comedy in that.
yeah,
you know?
yeah. Like the lady, she was already in heaven, so it's like,
Yeah.
you know, everyone should have laughed at the funeral. You know,
Maybe she
okay.
landed back on
Jeez,
No.
no, too far.
No. Didn't they get money from that or something? They had to sue somebody or something.
Okay, so 2 things. One,
First of all, I don't know if talking about someone's legal matters is the best idea.
who invited Mr. Law Pants over here? So he
Ongoing investigation.
yeah, no, that originally they like came to an agreement, and they were gonna compensate him for the pontoon boat, and Mr. Slater, being like the nicest human ever, was like super reasonable about it.
Yeah.
And
Got
then
walked all over.
like a couple years later, they still hadn't paid, and then he
Oh,
had to
God.
sue him and take him to court. Then they took him to court. They just won, and they just got
We just want our pontoon boat back. It's a little pet, doesn't even have a motor on it, please.
it's like $2,200 or something like that. So he gets they get the boat back, and then
Gets the judgment.
and then their lake goes away. So
Good Lord.
For people who don't know, the dam on the lake broke from
Yeah.
a flood, and then the whole
Lake
was
is gone.
Whole lake
Your
is
lake's
down like
gone.
9 feet or something.
Now it's just a river,
Yep.
Yeah.
an overgrown river.
Back to the other thing. This is a fun fact. I don't It's in India, I believe, but they have a bunch of catfish over there, and because of different ceremonies where they actually burn the bodies and stuff and do send stuff out to sea, because that does happen in a lot of cases in these different countries, the catfish there get huge, and then supposedly, because it was on River Monsters, they get like a taste for human flesh because basically the catfish eat all the bodies.
Has to be cooked nice though.
Yeah. Well, the fire for the cremation, but so they get a taste for human body parts, and then like so if someone's got their arm in the water, they're like attacked by fish, and there's been like reports of like
piranha catfish,
giant catfish getting a hold of people. We caught the 100+ pounder, and these species get way bigger than that.
Yeah.
So they get a hold of you. They could.
I had my hand in that one's mouth, and I couldn't imagine trying to like fight that thing. That our guide was right there with me to like, hey, help right in the moment. But just you're sitting there not even thinking anything's gonna happen, and all of a sudden something that's 100+ pounds has your hand in the water, and you don't even know what it is.
We should put up a picture of that because that fish is bonkers.
Woof.
Yeah, that was in our catfish episode. Matter of fact, it's gonna be launching here on Carbon TV as well as Clicks TV. So if you're listening to this podcast and it isn't like the first 3 days it came out, you can probably find those episodes there. Ryan, you made a statement I guess it was probably a couple podcasts ago about turkeys.
Yeah.
And how hard turkey hunting is. And one of the statements you made was, thank goodness they can't really smell because their eyesight's so good. They're like the smartest dumb things on the planet. They really are.
Yeah, so there was this article of this woman. Her name was Danielle Whitaker, and I'm not sure exactly what her accolades are, whether she's got like a PhD or what she does, but she knows stuff about birds, and she researches birds.
All right.
So she was talking about the way a lot of birds interact, and some of it has to do with just physically being near each other and the way the bird is moving and how altercations happen between birds. Another piece of it, though, she thinks is through their sense of smell. So your olfactory gland, which all animals have, we have them, and they think the bigger the olfactory gland, the better the sense of smell is. The smaller, the worse. Humans tend to have a smaller olfactory gland. Birds do as well, so it's believed that they can't smell that well. And so she's researching the olfactory gland, and then comes across this other thing called not olfactory gland, olfactory bulb. Then there's something called the preen gland, and that is usually on the tail feathers of the birds. And what they'll do is that'll be rubbed off in their nest or rubbed off on different things or other birds, and based on that scent, which is the gland produces preen, which then becomes a smelly bacteria.
Oh, that's like when you see a bird preening itself, they'll reach back, rub their head on the back of their back, and then rub it on their wings and rub it on, like you see a bird weirdly obsessive compulsively just rubbing their body with their head.
Right.
That's
like something reeks.
So that's
how I shower.
She was researching that, and she took preen from a different species of bird. I don't recall what the bird was that she took it from, and then put it on the eggs of a sparrow nest. And when the mama sparrow came back, it immediately took off. It could tell right away something else had been there.
They're like, these eggs smell like B.O.
Yeah. And what they were learning is they did a whole bunch of studies like this. What they were learning is that the way birds can identify different species or the same species. They can identify sex. They can identify even the size of the bird.
Oh, wow.
Based on the scent. And I don't think it's like, I think this is just naturally happening in birds. So the larger bird's going to give off a different scent, and a different species is going to know that's a bigger, different bird. I don't want to mess with that.
So it's maybe something kind of akin to like pheromones, sounds like.
Yeah.
It's the bird's metadata.
Yeah, pretty much. And so then the conversation got switched over to turkeys. So turkeys do the same thing as well, and they communicate through this preen oil substance, whatever, and they have a very small olfactory gland. However, they can still smell, and then that brought up the question, well, why don't they care about humans? Because it's believed that they still can smell humans in certain scenarios. It's not that their sense of smell across the board is exceptionally good. It's good for preen. They can smell preen well, and they can lightly smell other things. And she believes that they when we say they have a bad sense of smell, it's not that they have a bad sense of smell necessarily. It's more that they just don't care, because that's not something that's wired in their brain to care about.
Right.
They care about the smell of preen. We don't necessarily give that off, so they kind of just disregard it until they see it. And then because they have good eyesight, once they see
what stinks,
they see what stinks, they're like, "Oh, I got to get out of here."
Right.
So it's like they don't have as many scent receptors to take in smells, but the ones they do have are really good.
Right. For one thing specifically, and they've learned that's the one I have to care about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to care about this other one because it doesn't correlate to anything. It's just a scent until they see it, and then they're like, "Oh, I don't like that."
Mm-hmm. I better awkwardly run and get out of here.
Right. So they can smell well, but only very, very specifically.
So you were wrong and a dirty liar in the last podcast.
It's like a nice little update.
Well, no, I said that. I said
No, actually, it was accurate if you listen to the whole thing.
I wasn't paying attention.
You didn't put it. He's like, actually, I have preen cologne, and he's wrong.
There's a flock outside right now.
I'll tell you what. I wish I didn't have such a big olfactory gland when it came to what we did when we were in Florida, and I accidentally left. Bree kind of got us though. Bree told.
Oh no.
So we're in. We'll talk more about the Florida trip later, but I want to hit on this because the olfactory gland had me thinking about it. I thought that Bree got the bait out of my Sea-Doo bait well, and it was 101 in Florida.
Yeah.
It's how moist 101, by the way.
Yeah. Hard to breathe.
Yeah.
We can say who Bree is.
So Bree she's with BA_fishing on Instagram, and she represents Sea-Doo and does like a lot of their, she's basically a brand ambassador for Sea-Doo and the Fish Pro specifically, which is their fishing Sea-Doo that we were actually filming with when we were in Florida. But on the back is a bait well, and it circulates water, and it's great. It keeps the fish alive all the time. But when you're done fishing, you take the bait out of it. So we got out, we left, and she was going fishing the next day, so I thought she scooped out the bait. She alluded to the fact that she was going to, but did not. So then we drove, and then we didn't open that bait well for 2 days.
We said our goodbyes and just left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we didn't open it for 2 days. Now the real issue, because then when it smelled, I was like, oh, bait's in there. It's just going to be like a couple jerky fish, couple goggle eyes as they call them. That was the bait we were using. Gonna be a couple goggle eye jerky snacks. No big deal. But there was some water in the.
Whoa. We're missing a small detail too. I didn't know this happened. I think you had lightly admitted to it that he walked past it and smelled it, then got scared.
Yeah. Well,
instead of making jerky, it made a soup.
Something.
So that's the problem. The stew that existed.
Stew is worse.
It kept it
chunky.
It kept it moist enough to encourage the rotting process, as opposed to
Delaying.
Drying it out.
Yeah. Just enough. Mucus comes to mind.
Oh yeah.
Mucus, cottage cheese looking.
A nice frothy mix.
Brown.
Oh, froth.
If I had only eyesight and you told me the water had become Aunt Jemima syrup, I'd believe you.
Oh, all right.
But
not as sweet.
But I had but I had my sense of smell because of my olfactory gland, and it wasn't preen, but I was able to pick up on it. It seemed important to me.
I detected a threat.
We opened this thing up, and those suckers were rotten. I mean, and there was only 3 bait fish, but they were rotten, and it was like their guts were out, but they were intact.
Yeah.
It was like the skin just disappeared and then just rot, and it smelled so bad.
Oh, man.
We're at an Airbnb too, so we got to take this thing off, and I manned up. I did. I got it off the thing.
We got good reviews on Airbnb, so I'm
somehow.
assuming this ends well.
Yeah. So we took it to by the road and dumped it, and it took everything in me to pull that off. And I was, I wrapped a shirt and around my head and my face.
Oh, yeah.
So So I wrap it around my face. I like a shirt around my face.
You can always tell when someone's on the side of the road with a shirt wrapped around their face. Something went down.
Yeah, something bad happened.
So I dump out
Especially in Florida.
I dump out the cooler and the fish, and then we took it and we just filled it with laundry detergent because that's what we had, and dish soap and Lysol spray, and we did about 50 rinses, and it never was right. It always was a little ripe the rest of the trip, but we made it tolerable. And then by the last day, I used that jet ski, called it Old Stinky.
Yep.
I used that Sea-Doo on accident because I was going to use the other one. And then once I was circulating fresh water through there, it wasn't terrible. But it wasn't good.
We did get scared when at one of the houses we were at, we kept the Sea-Doos at nighttime in the garage, and this was during the rotting process. So the garage smelled pretty bad even after the cooler was clean.
Yeah,
like it was
like
it was like lingering in there. Like it didn't matter how open everything was. The garage, the doors, everything was
The
open.
scent was baked in.
It was
stuff.
really funny. I go, we were there was a door to the hallway, which was the laundry room, and then my bedroom was actually down there too. And I opened that door to go to the garage for a second. And I go, hey Jay, it's getting in, and it got in.
You see it coming.
So
It's
it
like
was
the
like
cartoons
that.
with the hand, where the pie's coming to get you, only it's not a pie.
Exactly.
So I hurried up and shut the laundry room door, and I got his candle. He brought a candle from home, and I took it and put it in there and lit it. He goes, it's a little candle. I go, we need something. He goes, all right. So we left that in there for like 6 hours, and then went back in, and then it lightly smelled like candle and not as much like terrible.
Smelled like off apple pie.
I couldn't imagine
good.
that 3 little fish this big could throw off that kind of stench.
It was
it's
bad.
It
was really
You
bad.
leave them wet. No,
Yeah,
they'll
decomposition.
get you.
So that I just thought of that because when we were talking about scents and smells,
So
I
your
figured
glands were put to the test.
my glands were put to the test. I sensed a
Unfortunately,
threat.
they work.
Yeah, if I was that sparrow, I would have turned around from those eggs too. So there was another story that kind of reminded me of this. When I first read it, I thought of it kind of wrong, but it was in Connecticut. So these guys were fined $4,200 because they were on the Connecticut River, and they were fishing for carp, but they were common carp. But apparently on this river, and I kind of like, I don't know, man. I don't know what it is about me, but anytime I watch Cops or I watch what's that show, the
Wardens?
the Wardens, the Game Warden show and stuff like that, I'm always like, come on. Like, I always tend to want to side with the bad guy, and I don't know why that is. But I'm like, give him a break. Like, he didn't know. Or, like, when they go after someone for, like, baiting for deer when you can do it in most states, so you couldn't do it in that one. It's like,
just snagging.
He's feeding his family.
This is like foreshadowing for something that happens 2 weeks from now.
It's not, I swear. But anyhow, in this situation, I was like, well, it's carp. Like, you can go out and shoot a bucket of carp in Michigan. I mean, you can go out and torch carp with bows. Or however. It's like they're thought of as a trash fish. So I was like, well, maybe these guys just thought that, and on the Connecticut River, they didn't realize that was the case. But when they didn't have licenses, so I was like, all right, well, so you kind of screwed up there. It's hard to back you up there. And they had like dozens of these carp, and you're only allowed 1 per day. And I think it's got to be over 26 inches or something. So they were way over, which is how they racked up a $4,200 bill.
Do they like treasure carp?
I know, it's so weird.
It's considered, and they use this term, a trophy carp river.
What?
Yeah.
These are uncommon carp.
Yeah. That actually is the common carp species, which is technically not considered a non-native or invasive species.
Yeah.
So, because of that, the common carp is treasured there. But whereas like Asian carp, you can go out and they're begging you. I think it's illegal to put them back. You know what I mean? If you shoot, if you get them. So
this is how other people experience the story of not being able to hunt doves in Michigan. They're like, we hunt them everywhere here.
Right.
They're like, why would you try to protect them? They're literally everywhere, and they taste good. What?
Well, so speaking of tasting good, that's what was interesting is they said, well, to remind you, the common carp were brought in during the Industrial Revolution for food because people ate them. So that's kind of interesting. It was they were planted there And they're like, hey, you're coming in and shooting
Because
all,
they breed well.
all our guys in the factory really want to eat those. Don't do that.
It's a hot commodity.
Yeah. So I found that to be pretty interesting. And then in the article, stupid me read it at first, and I was like, wait, what? And they're like, well, these fish won't go to waste. We're donating them to a facility for it's a rehabilitation center for injured mammals. And I was like,
What?
what are you gonna? Are you gonna rehab the fish? And then I was like, oh no, you're gonna feed him the fish, stupid.
Oh,
But yeah, your head wants to go there.
I was
like,
getting angry.
You're like they are not gonna rehab those carp. that was where my head went too. But no,
We have sea monkeys then too.
yeah, no, it was more normal than
These
that.
guys had a lot going against them. It's hard to side with them,
Yeah. Once you don't have the licenses, I'm out. And then
especially because the licenses are they're not that expensive.
the only thing they had going for them at that point was they had them in coolers, so they had a plan.
Yeah.
I like that they weren't gonna waste them.
I won't-
That's all I had.
Yeah, what do you?
I'm kind of with you when there's stories like that, though. It's because we've learned this traveling around, going to different states. Like, it can be really hard to properly understand all of the laws that are required just for you to have a successful legal hunt. So, like, I would totally get, like, hey, sorry, we took 5. We didn't know. We're from Michigan. They're everywhere in Michigan. So but we bought our licenses. We didn't realize that there was a big thing. So you get your 1. Everybody gets 1. And then after that, if you do it again, it's a big deal. But if you've got 40 some of them and you didn't buy a license,
It was dozens. But the to note, just to make sure I don't stand corrected on this, you're allowed 1 single carp per day that is no longer than 26 inches.
So it has to be
it's
shorter.
Yeah. So, which I assume the bigger than 26 are the breeders.
Yeah.
They're that.
Don't you back to Jeff's point? Don't you love how they phrase that though? No longer. Why just
It's a
say
little
shorter? No
confusing.
shorter than.
Yeah.
It's like they always try to.
Get you.
Yeah, it's always like
Well,
everything's worded
they're
difficult.
translating it from legal speak. So it's still going to be a little weird,
I hate it.
Yeah. Like, you
Mind
would
your
think that
own.
should be their responsibility to, like, make it as easy as, like, they make the digest for a lot of different states where you could see all the summary of the rules. And even there, it's not that easy to get through all of it,
Yeah, they can't wait.
Well, ignorant. What do they say? Ignorance of the law doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So they're spending. It says that they're spending quite a bit of time and money to try and get people to understand that the common carp is not an invasive. It's not an Asian carp, and that it is actually a prized species. So, good luck. It's putting
Sounds
out
like bogus
to
me.
lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
The Greenway Outdoors is brought to you by Ram Trucks, built to serve. Motor Trend's Truck of the Year for the 3rd year in a row. And by Bass Pro Shop and Cabela's. Your adventure starts here. Tracker Boats, fish the finest. And by these other fine sponsors.
Trust isn't built in a day. It's built over time. The early hours and the late nights. It's built by doing the work and pushing the limits every day. Because the promises we make are the promises we were built to keep.
If you'd like to help support the Greenway Outdoors, please like and comment on this podcast and subscribe to all of our channels.
Transition to next story's going a little slow. Hey, speaking of slow, you had a story about sloths?
Go ahead, Ryan.
So I've been for probably 2 years now. I've been trying to read this book. It's pretty involved, and it's called a
5th grade reading level?
Yeah, it's hard.
That was pretty good. He kind of got you.
It's called A Brief History of Humankind, and it just talks about the knowledge we have from the beginning of humans to present. And one of the things...
Is it like a comparison thing? Like you're comparing like, oh, in the 1600s we knew this, now we know this? Or is it like, here's everything that we've learned along the way? That okay.
Yeah, so
I bet if you would have waited like 10 seconds, you would have found out.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Anyways, in this, they're talking about hundreds of thousands of years ago, the way humans were developing and the world that they had to live in and how dangerous it was. And 100,000 years ago, the landscape as far as animals was much different. We had a lot of very, very, very large mammals, and the reason we don't have them anymore is because we hunted them into extinction. And large mammals, they talked about one animal that took like a year and a half to reproduce. So when it was impregnated, a year and a half to drop.
Jeez.
And so one of the animals that we used to have here in the United States or in North America was the ground sloth. And it was just another one of those animals hunted to extinction. And it was
Easy hunt.
it was rediscovered in 1797 was the first fossil or
By the colonials.
or remains found of this animal. And I guess the hot spot for it, weirdly enough, is in West Virginia. I don't know why. They've found a lot in this particular area of the United States.
Colonial Williamsburg.
Like you
original 13.
like you said, though, the landscape was so different then. So.
Right. I don't know enough to really explain why they would all be in one area. It has to be food, I would assume. But I would just doing more research on these large mammals, and specifically the ground sloth. There was this article written about a guy who was out turkey hunting with his father-in-law, and they were stalking these two turkeys. They were just kind of doing what we do, the spot and stalk, and as they were moseying across this river, they started following them, and this river had previously had a flash flood, so there was like a lot of exposed dirt on the side of this river. And while they were standing there figuring out what they were going to do to chase these turkey, they saw the guy who found this item saw a clump of dirt, and he like kind of like shoot it out of his way, like kicked it out of his way.
Yeah.
But it didn't really move, and so he's like looking at it, kind of like realizing how you look at something, you're not quite figuring it out, and it takes a while to stare at it. So he was doing that, and finally he approached it, picked it up, and it was a massive skull, and he said it weighed about 30 pounds. But it was, it was full of clay and dirt and all that, so it was still messy.
It's old.
So it was a giant skull, super cool. So he sets it aside. He's gonna come back for it later. They finish out their hunt, comes back for the skull, and they get it all cleaned up, and they're looking at it, and they're trying to figure out what this is. The guy's wife thinks it's a bull skull, and the wife's father laughs at her and makes fun of her for not knowing that's not a bull skull.
Classic.
And they can't figure it out. It doesn't make any sense. So they start looking up things that have 2 molars on each side. It had 4 teeth total, and
Did you say 14 or 4?
4 teeth.
That's not very many.
And they figured out that sloths have teeth like this, and then they started doing more research, and they contacted a doctor at a museum, I believe, and he confirmed that it was a ground sloth from around 11,000 years ago, which is around the time of extinction for this giant mammal. And
that's interesting.
The guy who found it says it's in safekeeping right now. It sounds like he's trying to hide it from everybody because it's got some sort of value, but he's also been spouting off about donating it to a museum. But I'm sure he wants a little bit of.
He wants.
In the movies, when you find the treasure and you donate it to the museum, they still get Ferraris. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He's just trying to save it so his name will go on the species. This is Slothicus Jim Brownicus.
Jim Brown. That's so funny.
That's actually.
So it'd be really freaking cool to find a giant sloth. To come to the realization of everything, be like, what is this? And then researching it and figuring it out and talking to people. Sounds like a little movie.
You know, I think it's cool anytime you can find any kind of like bones or skulls or anything. Remember that park over by our house where there was like a whole mess of them? We like there was like those little stones that were everywhere, and we would just always dig up. No, I'm just kidding. It's a cemetery joke, Jeff. I don't.
Oh, you said
Ryan got it.
I'm thinking like, where by our house is there a park with stones? You can't think of
Yeah.
You would make fun of dead people? It's a terrible joke to make on the podcast.
You're the one who brought up the lady that got ate by the elephant.
Ate?
You didn't
This time she was eating.
tossed her like a pizza. You know what I'm talking about.
She's throwing down.
My dad, when he was growing up on their farm, it always impressed me when he's telling the story and growing up and seeing how far the cemetery actually was from the farm, that they would walk down into the cemetery as kids, and it's an impressive walk for little kids. But I guess one of the days, it was after like the 4th of July or Memorial Day or something, they walked down there, and there's 4 siblings in total, and they're all a year apart. It's like baby after baby after baby. And so all very close in age, and I think my dad was around 8 years old, and he was the youngest. So the range was from 12 to 8 to 12, and they went to the cemetery, and they were hanging out doing their thing. They come back, and my grandma's like, "Where'd you get all these flags?" They're like,
nice.
"Oh, down the road." She's like, "Yeah, where?" "Well, the cemetery. You have to go put those back right now."
This one's mine, and that one's mine, and here's some flowers for Ma.
But I got them for you, I swear.
Yeah, that's a little dark. Actually, a fun fact about a sloth is before the Green Bay Outdoors existed, my very first press,
Your very first kill.
was at the Detroit Zoo. No, my very first press of any kind was, we had the Jason Project. I think I may have told the story before, but the Jason Project was like this educational week that took place at our elementary school. And I got to meet the governor, and then they interviewed me and asked me a question. And they said, out of everything you learned this week, what's the one fact that stands out to you most? And my first quote of all time in the newspaper was,
I like turtles.
my first quote of all time was, "Sloths poop once a week." And the governor said, "Yep." And then that was it.
Yep.
He's like, how'd you remember?
Engler.
That was
Governor Engler.
That was your
you-
first junket?
Yeah. That was my first.
I think they have to go to the ground to poop too.
Yeah, that's why it takes them once a week. It takes them so long to get down there.
How'd you remember that, kid? Oh, me too.
That's fair. That's fair until I got that mucil.
Oh my gosh.
Now, we haven't had a podcast in a few weeks, and that was because we were in Florida. And we're going to be talking to Bree from Sea-Doo, the girl that I mentioned earlier, the expert, and one heck of a fisherwoman. Fisherwoman? Do you say fish?
Just angler. It's probably fine.
Angler's fine.
Yeah.
Shut up, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Rye. Thanks.
Right.
So anyhow,
I'm sorry.
we're going to be talking to her about everything we did with Sea-Doo and all the deep sea fishing and the crazy fishing that we did do. But before we do that, I want to talk about the tarpon fishing that we did while we were there.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that this week, and then we'll talk about
The rest of craziness in Florida.
Yeah, so upon arriving, we met up with Frank Viola.
Viola.
I know he corrected me a couple times. It never stuck. But we met up with him to go fishing for tarpon. And he introduced us to a guy named Court.
Ah, yes.
And Court is
Like basketball court?
Yes.
I'm so bad with names, and the names always happen when I'm getting mic'd or I'm doing something. And then I'm like,
Never sticks.
yeah. I can tell you everything about Court, but, his son just got a new bow. He got a new bow as well, got it used for a good price. They're going to start shooting together. His son doesn't like to fish, but he does, but he's not super into it. Like, I can tell you everything about the guy.
That's details you care about.
But names I struggle with big time.
I wonder if that's short for
You couldn't
is
you
there-
couldn't remember Court? That one didn't
No, I
stick?
could because
Okay.
that one stuck because it was weird.
Okay.
is like Courtney one of those?
No,
names that
I think
could
it's just
be-
Court.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Court.
Court.
Huh.
Cool dude. Great beard.
Yeah.
So we met up with those two, and the idea was, Frank had like this random idea. He's like, you know what we should do? We should teach you to fly fish. And he called me, and he goes, hey, how do you feel about fishing with the best? That's my bad, AJ. He said, how do you feel about fishing with the best fly fisherman in Florida? I was like, I've never fly fished before.
Bad.
I go, I've never fly fished before, but that sounds like the right way to learn.
Sure.
Which turned out to not be the case. Court yelled at me. No, I'm just kidding. He did not.
Mean.
So we go out the first day, and we're on a flat, is what they call it. And basically it's 2 to 4 foot of water.
Yep.
Sandy bottom, and the fish go up there, and you're talking giant tarpon. So for those of you who don't know what a tarpon is, imagine a giant silver bait fish. And when I say giant, I mean up to 180-pound giant.
Yeah.
I mean big, big, big.
6 feet, 5 feet.
Biggest minnow you ever saw in your life?
Yep.
Yes.
And hardy.
That move like sharks too. Porpoise through the water.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I would like to say they, hardy is a word to describe them. Covered in big scales, very tough fish, bony mouths, just built to mess stuff up. Anyhow, they're on these flats right now, and they're migrating because they're going to breed. So they kind of migrate through here at certain times a year, and you sight fish for them. And if you can fly fish, basically, your goal is to run a fly right across the front of their mouth. Now, for whatever reason, during the day and on these flats, they don't tend to eat bait and I'll explain that later. I'll explain the baiting later, but they tend not to eat bait. So running a fly is a better way to do it because they will hit that apparently. And we had a few follows. But getting there, AJ, you can talk about the drone situation with it. It's like once we arrived, I was having trouble seeing the fish when you're like in the boat and you're like on this little cockpit thing, but you're having trouble seeing them. But
They also have like X-ray vision where they can see things in the water. We're both looking at the same thing, and I'm not seeing what you're seeing.
yeah.
Sight fishing in the ocean sounds interesting.
I mean, they're like, "Oh, it's right there," and I'm like looking there, and nothing's there. But
Right.
but it is there,
You mean
and
more-
they can see it.
You mean more water? Because that's what I see. More water.
So
Oh, wow.
So Frank just says, "Throw that drone up. We'll scout with that, and we'll just circle around it."
Okay.
And he was 100% correct. I mean,
Please believe me, they're there.
40, 50 feet in the air, and just straight camera straight down, and they're, swimming in circular patterns, swimming around the boats. You can see them clear as day
Oh.
From the drone shots.
from up here. So I'm like looking down at the monitor and relaying to Kyle, over to your left, over to your right.
Yeah.
And I still don't know if he saw him or not, but we could see him clear as day.
Was it choppy that day?
No.
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 Two
It's
feet
not
of-
choppy. You're in an inlet. You're in we're basically in Tampa Bay, right?
Was that Tampa Bay?
No, it's clear water, so it's like its own bay.
Okay. I know it's
whatever
near.
the bay that's
yeah.
there is.
Tampa Bay is
Yeah.
like 10 miles south.
Okay. We're in a bay. We're in. There's an inlet to get out to the main ocean, so you're kind of protected. So there's not a lot of waves or anything like that. But yeah, taking the drone up, seeing these things, and it's funny because like looking at the footage later on, I go, no, don't cast there. Long story short, we did okay. Ryan tried the fly fishing too.
I really want to get a fly fishing setup now.
Really?
Yes.
Court inspired you?
Just trying it. I like watching Court do it was awesome. The guy's super good at it. But
He's
like
nice
after
and
trying
smooth.
it, like just you could feel how like once you get the hang of it, it would be really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Which I didn't realize how popular fly fishing was down in Florida.
Yeah, he
'Cause-
did say it was huge.
Because another guy, Drew, pulled his fly rod out. He's like, I love it.
Well, he was
Half the people I take out fly fish.
He did say that.
Frank Orcourt said that they believe that fly fishing for tarpon is the number one inspiration to get people into fly fishing now. Like
Oh,
that's
nice.
that's
Did
the
it for me.
think
the
Frank
fishing
said
trip
that.
that's getting everybody into it right now. So I thought that was interesting. So we did that. Failed miserably. I did get a couple casts that made sense that went right across the fish's face and he just didn't want it. Which I said how often do they strike? He goes, you probably got to place 12 good flies before one will take. I was like, 3 out of 12 ain't bad. So I was like, man, I really hope you're real front heavy on that statistic, but we weren't. So then we went out to basically the bridges that head out to the ocean, like that kind of you go out the inlet if you continue to go under the bridge and out. And what's happening then is these little crabs are floating down. They get up into the current and then they float out to the ocean, and they do it at night. And it starts like around 10 p.m. or something like that. So we went to this bridge and the crabs are floating by. So literally we just took out the bait nets and you're just waiting for crabs to go by the boat and you scoop them up. And they're like little guys, and they're like, they try and get away a little bit when they see it going. Yeah. But they're relatively easy. Ryan, how many did you get the one night?
I don't even know.
Ryan made it his goal when we were just waiting to get a fish. He's like, well, call me when you're ready. And until then, I'm catching crabs. And he might as well have been in Vegas because he was catching crabs.
You gotta use the little shampoo now? Or?
Yeah.
The comb.
How many do you think you got?
I'd
100.
Yeah, 100 in a
Really?
couple hour period. It was awesome, and it was fun.
I asked Frank too. I was like, at what point does this become annoying?
You did.
I was like, I don't know if
I'm not stopping.
I didn't know if it was just annoying him or if getting them was good or what.
Was he like using them for later? Or?
No, he can sell them.
You can resell.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
He
okay.
sold them to the bait shop.
Oh, neat.
They can buy them from him legally and then sell them as bait.
Oh, cool.
So Ryan made him money.
Yeah.
Definitely.
A good amount.
Yeah, good amount.
So we're catching them, and then basically the tarpon come there at night to feed on those crabs. So they know that those crabs are going to be floating through there anyhow. So what you do is you catch one, and then the bigger one's the better. One pinched me so good I bled. But really? you hook them at the very tip edge. So if you're looking at the crab, and he's got 2 points on each side of him, and then his claws are out front. You hook one of those points, the least amount of it as possible, but to make sure it gets on the hook. Then you drop it in the water, and you open your bail, and then you let it free spool down, and you have a bobber. Or no, you do not have a bobber. I take that back. There is no bobber. You just free spool it, and you let it go down, and then if your line starts really ripping out, you set the bail, and then you set the hook and Frank said he was setting the hook 3-4 times.
Oh.
I didn't get the memo, but I said it once, and perfectly, I might add.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was floating down, and all of a sudden, my line just starts peeling out, and I look at Frank, I go, that's different. He's been quoting me ever since. He said that's all he's ever going to say again. And he goes, turn the bail over. And I'm like, it's going out quick, but not it's not what I imagined. So I was 60% thinking I had a fish.
You've done this before, but you're wrong.
So I set the bail reel and I set the hook and I'm like, oh mother. I'm like, this is something. He goes, just keep reeling. And he immediately takes off and we were in spot lock with the trolling motor. Turns that off, gets the boat, and we start chasing the fish.
Oh.
I mean, he's driving the boat and I'm reeling as fast as I can to keep up with the fish, and he's just trying to cut the space because for the first, the minute that it took him to get us going, that fish took a lot of line. Yeah. It was just zzz, and I'm just like, this isn't real life. I'm like, I'm thinking it's got to be a shark. It's like
Frank's like, we're going to be here for an hour.
He's got a buddy doing scuba, and he's got something down there that he's pulling on with.
I've caught giant sturgeon. I mean, I've caught sharks. I've caught tuna, mahi. Nothing compares to this.
Yeah.
The way it peeled out line was bonkers. And he goes, okay, close the bail and start reeling. I'm like, I don't want to. I got to tell you, it was, he sits me up in front of the boat on a cooler, has a seat, and poor AJ's trying to work all the lighting. Ryan's on the follow boat. He's trying to film from the other boat to get the outside perspective. The fish immediately takes us from this. Under the bridge, we had all kinds of lights because it's super lit down there. He takes us out. I mean, he can't wait to get to the dark, the fish. So we're running all the lights and trying to deal with the camera equipment. And I'm not helping anybody with anything because I am just holding on for dear life. I can't explain to you the power of this fish. It's so much worse than a sturgeon. It's so much stronger than anything else I've ever felt in my life. It was, as soon as it was happening,
paddlefish?
Way worse. Paddlefish is a joke. Doesn't not even a smither. Although enjoy our paddlefish episode that's coming out in a couple weeks.
Paddlefish. It's depending on how you hook them can be pretty rough.
No.
We've had a
Jeff,
couple.
I can't I can't explain to you how this is. I don't think saying 100 times harder is enough.
Oh.
And I'm trying not to exaggerate. So maybe it's 55 times harder, but it's that much harder for sure.
Wow.
This fish went berserk. So I'm up in the front, and it was so frustrating because you're reeling down, you reel as you lower your rod towards the fish, and then you lift up again. And the idea is, a couple of the tactics and a couple of things they were saying to me is, they're always make the fish be turning the boat. So there's a boat with 3-4 guys in it. It's not a little boat. We're all in it. And basically what you're doing is in the front is, if the fish is trying to swim this way, trying to go that way, you're putting the rod on the other side of the boat, and you're making him pull the entire front of the boat and turn it away, okay. And that tires him down. Mm-hmm. Another thing was they kept saying drown them, which I don't know what that meant, but because it's a fish, silly. They said drown him, drown him, drown him, and they kept calling it a handstand. And basically, the fish would come up, and they proved right. The fish would come up and get a gulp of air as a break. And when he would do that, it was as if you punched him in the butt with 62 Red Bulls and a B12 shot. And he would just, once he got that gulp of air, he's like, so long, suckers. And it's like, we're going out to sea. And at a point, he started to take us out there.
Yeah, we
got pretty close.
We weren't far.
Yeah, so we started to go out the inlet. I'm like, if we go on the waves start getting big, and I'm like, you add waves to this. I'm a chumba, which is Australian for puke, and things are going to get hairy. And it did for a bit. But so he's peeling out. But every time you like reel and bring it down to him or get him to turn the boat or something like that, it's like he would just take out whatever you gained. You'd hear the spool give it back to him, and it's like, ugh. And when you get that gulp of air, it would be like he'd go on a 4 or 5 minute run, peeling line the whole time, just, and the whole rod's going. I'm like, this is, and at this point, like the one time the gulp of air, I'm like, I got nothing. Like I started looking around. I'm like, I'm gonna have to have somebody like tap in. It's been 40 minutes, and I'm the whole time you're using the same muscles and you're just torquing, and it's like
every time you got close, it went back out.
And you're turning it. And we had a couple good looks at it too. And in the water, I saw it, and he goes, "It's a big one." I'm like, figures.
Of course it is.
I would have taken average. It was a long night, you know. So we're still going, but back to the drowning thing. So what you're supposed to do is when they come up for that gulp of air and you feel them starting to come up, you have to dunk the front of the rod in the water as far as you can possibly go and not let them get that gulp of air. When you do that, they kind of do a handstand where it like forces their head down and their tail goes straight up and down, and that just sucks the life out of them big time. Not enough to really have an effect, but it's better than the gulp of air nitric oxide thing they got going on. It's like, you know, ridiculous. We were quoting Fast and the Furious where we were out there, and so it goes on for about an hour and 15 minutes of that. And by this time, I'm
over it.
I'm like, and they're like, come on, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. I'm like, I think I tore something in my shoulder. Of course, it's the right shoulder. As soon as it heals, I do something else stupid like this, and it was just crazy. I mean, from the chaos of Ryan trying to film it too, I can't even imagine what it looked like over there.
It was like I was on Court's boat, and he has this thing on the front that's like a giant pedestal thing that you stand inside of. It's like a
crow's nest.
A crow's nest.
Yeah. And it wraps around your waist. So I'm like propping myself in there, like as we're like doing laps around this boat, trying to get the best shot possible.
The fish is turning the
Close
boat
to midnight.
It's spinning out. Yeah, I'm sweating through shirts. I look like you in 70-degree weather.
I picture him like talking about how intense it is, whatever, and then we cut to his camera, and all you see is him in the distance going.
It was intense.
It was.
And the fish was turning the boat so often that the camera boat was having so much trouble pacing around that AJ just got on our boat. He was just with me because it was chaos. We get it to the boat, and Frank grabs it, and he tells me to grab the gloves out of the bucket and open the bail to give him some slack.
Oh, yeah.
And he's holding on to this. He said 150 pounds. And he said it was like one of the biggest ones they got all year. And in the 20 years he's been doing it, it's like the 6th biggest or something. It's very, very, very big version of this fish. And it thrashes and beats the living daylights out of him and gets off. And then he goes to grab the pole, and it's like going, and it broke the line because once it went it was like wrapped around something.
When you got the gloves, you set the pole down.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
And it was just sitting there.
Right. Because he said
he didn't take the pole.
No.
No.
Oh,
the pole
okay.
was just
No,
there.
he said give me slack, so I gave him slack, and then I just set the pole down because I got to go get the gloves.
He did tell you.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
and the line wrapped around something in the boat.
Sure.
So when the fish had full force in the line, the line was only 100-pound line, I think, or something like 75-pound line. It's light tackle. So as soon as the force of the fish was, and there was no reel to deal with it, it just snapped. So the fish got off. So the footage is a little sketch at the end, but we got plenty of it of the fish itself for the actual episode itself. But catching a 150-pound tarpon at night is...
Well, watching Frank, like Frank's hand is in its mouth and he's holding on, and watching it start to thrash while he's holding on. And Frank's not a small dude.
Oh, he's pretty big.
Frank's like 6'6".
Yeah, he's a pretty
single, by the way, ladies.
Yeah. And watching it start to thrash, I'm starting to freak out. Like, it's gonna snap his arm. He's got to let go.
Yeah.
He's got to let go.
Because you can't imagine the power. And this is gonna be.
You don't expect it.
Yeah, and this
Fish
is
ain't gonna hurt me.
it's actually going to be in an upcoming episode. So this entire premise, along with some of the other stuff that we'll talk about with Bree, is going to be in an episode of the Green Outdoors, our Florida fishing extravaganza. But that was an exciting piece of it.
It was wild.
Yeah, that was like I said, by far the meanest fish we've ever encountered.
Well, what's funny is like we're going through this hectic, chaotic experience, and then over on shore, just enough to hear. There's like this huge club going on. It's like you got Pitbull's, all his tunes are going on.
Yeah.
We're going crazy with this boat, and the scenario is just
It
insane.
was super Florida.
Yeah. It is kind of funny because, like, all around us, like he said, was on shore or, like, nightclubs and stuff like that. And here's these rednecks out in the boat catching a
Being drug out to sea.
Yeah, by 150-pound fish.
But now that you said that, though, and we mentioned this, we couldn't believe that you could catch a tarpon on a fly fish rod.
Yeah, that would
It
that
still
would have been
doesn't
a
make
job.
sense.
Now I was like, thank God I didn't hook up because what the heck would have happened for me? Yeah, and I said in court when we said that to him, I think it might have been you and I. He goes, "Oh, it would have been easier."
Well, isn't it like that's like thicker line? So wouldn't you not have as much line to
I'm
even?
not
play
buying
with?
that. It would not have been
No,
easy.
no.
It would not have been
Convinced
easy.
the pole would break. I'm convinced.
I'm convinced that wasn't a
Have to see it to believe
that
it.
little light fly fishing rod I was using, and the odds of me having the skills, never having fly fished, to even have known what to do once it happened would have just been just.
Oh, that's different. Oh, it's gone.
yeah. Thank you so much for tuning
It
in
was
to the
nuts.
Greenway Outdoors podcast. That new episode that we're talking about will be coming out soon. Check us out on Carbon TV or YouTube. If you're just listening to this podcast on Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, you can actually watch it, see our ugly faces, and probably some behind-the-scenes B-roll on our podcast on YouTube as well as Carbon TV. Please check us out on our main TV show, which can be found on a variety of platforms, including Carbon TV and Clicks TV. You can find that at www.thegreenwayoutdoors.com and then click How to Watch. You can find all of our episodes there. In addition to that, our online series, our Huntcast series, is on Carbon TV as well as Clicks TV, as well as thegreenwayoutdoors.com and YouTube channel as well. Our how-to video series is also found there called the Outdoor Education Series. So check out everything that we have to offer.
We had a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we got a lot going on. Check us out on thegreenwayoutdoors.com, Facebook, Instagram, all of our socials. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for tuning in. Stay green.